What if I told you that there was only one team in the 90s that had the #1 ranked offense and defense? And what if I told you that this same team was coached by someone with no experience as a head coach? This is the story of how the '96 Green Bay Packers broke the NFL and ended a 2-decade-long curse. In 1992, a quarterback coach by the name of Mike Holmgren was named head coach of the Green Bay Packers. Now, Holmgren had never been a head coach at any level up until this point. So when he was hired in '92, it was a massive gamble, because this man would walk into a franchise with one playoff win in 25 years. The Packers were broken, so the rebuild had to start immediately. So 1 month later, they traded for Brett Favre, the backup quarterback of the Falcons. Favre was raw and reckless, the type of QB who believed every throw was possible. And as Favre threw countless interceptions, it didn't take long for Holmgren to get mad. But here's the thing, Holmgren didn't bench him permanently. Why? Because Holmgren was a former quarterback coach. If there was any teachers who could build up Favre, it was him. Either they would rise together and win, or they would fall together and the Packers would continue suffering. But Holmgren wasted little time transforming the franchise. Before he arrived, the team went 4-12. Under his guidance, the team improved to a solid 9-7 record. The team was improving, but in order to win the Super Bowl, Holmgren knew one thing: defense wins championships. So, in 1993, they went after a player who was capable of transforming an entire defense, Reggie White. White was a former Defensive Player of the Year, a player named All-Pro in every season he played in, except his rookie year. Then, in the secondary, you had Leroy Butler, an All-Pro safety. The pieces were slowly coming together. And in 1995, Green Bay had finally arrived. They were the 6th-ranked offense and had the 4th-ranked defense. And Brett Favre? He was a force of nature who could win games by himself. He left little to debate as he was named MVP for the season. And in the end, Mike Holmgren had led them to their first division title in 23 years. Could this team go all the way? But the underdog story would be short-lived. In the NFC Championship game, the Packers collapsed against the Dallas Cowboys. They were so close, enough to making the Super Bowl, but in the end, they were sent home by the team of the 90s. So, heading into the '96 season, there was this obsession to finish what they had started, and everyone knew one thing: to be the best, you have to beat the best. But was it going to be that easy? Brett Favre was the reigning MVP, sure. The rest of the offense, though, had become one-dimensional. Hall of Fame receiver Sterling Sharp retired in '94, and the running game was abysmal. It was ranked near the bottom of the league. And Reggie White? He was getting older and fighting through injuries. Reggie needed help with all those double teams. So, in the offseason, the Packers went all in on free agent Santana Dotson. Critics doubted his work ethic, but the Packers saw a 285-pound monster who could collapse the pocket. Green Bay had a strong team. So, entering the season, the media was already hyping them up as one of the Super Bowl favorites. But Mike Holmgren, he wasn't buying the hype. He still demanded perfection in every drill because anything less would not be enough to dethrone the Cowboys. And here's what the stats don't always show. NFC Central? It was stacked back then. Winning the division again wasn't going to be easy sailing. And Week 1 was against the new and improved Buccaneers, who were ready to compete. But the Packers' defense? They slammed the door before the Bucs could even find their rhythm. 6 turnovers forced as Leroy Butler in the backfield had 2 interceptions. To put that in perspective, the '95 Packers only had 16 turnovers all season. The defense was feasting. But here's the thing. Everyone was actually watching to see Brett Favre, because in the offseason, he went through rehab for his addiction. So, wanting to redeem himself, the gunslinger answered the call. 247 yards, 4 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. But one thing became very clear from this game. See, Favre's go-to guy is usually Robert Brooks, who caught 13 touchdown passes in '95. But Brooks was usually double-teamed, so Favre instead connected with tight end Keith Jackson for 3 touchdown passes. Final score, Green Bay 34, Tampa Bay 3. Critics, though, still believed the Packers were one-dimensional. If you stopped the pass, you stopped the team. So, in Week 2, the ground game was ready to silence all doubters. Edgar Bennett picked apart the Eagles, 93 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. The running game as a whole rushed for 171 yards, proving that they shouldn't be disrespected. And by the end of the night, the Packers defense had recorded another 3 sacks and forced 3 more interceptions, bringing their turnover total to 9 in just 2 weeks. The final score was 39-13 as the Packers dismantled a playoff-caliber team. But while the media called them the best team in the NFL, Coach Holmgren knew something they didn't. The better you get, the harder it gets, because teams start shooting for you. And in Week 3, Brett Favre proved he was the most focused and mentally tough player in the league. Just days before the game, his sister was arrested, adding to his summer of headlines. Critics wondered if these distractions would finally rattle the Packers leader, but instead, the opposite happened. See, the San Diego Chargers had All-Pro linebacker Junior Seau, a dangerous player with his blitzes. But Favre, his scrambling ability turned San Diego's aggression against them. He recorded 231 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Get this, the Packers had outscored their first 3 opponents by a combined 115-26. The team looked invincible, but the script was about to get a lot harder. The Packers were heading into a 3-game road trip, starting in Minneapolis against the undefeated Vikings. Minnesota had a relentless pass rush, spearheaded by All-Pro John Randall. To win, the Packers' O-line needed to show up. But on this day, they were beaten relentlessly. Favre was sacked 7 times, the second most in his entire career. The Packers lost the game 30-21, a sound beating that exposed Green Bay's pass protection. Brett Favre was no longer that cocky gunslinger, and all that Super Bowl talk was officially silenced. But after this meltdown, the Packers faced a haunting statistic. They had lost 12 of their last 13 games played on artificial turf. Their next game, it was in the Kingdome, another plastic grass bubble of horrors in Seattle. The media were convinced that the Packers were a grass-only team. So, once again, the Packers came into this game with their heads on fire. Even though the Seahawks defense played okay, Favre was impossible to beat. His mobility to escape a pass rush was simply breaking the league, and he threw 4 touchdown passes without throwing a single interception. The Packers won 31-10, proving they could dominate on any surface. But a mastermind like Favre doesn't stop there. While running at top speed with a linebacker in pursuit, Favre launched a ball that traveled nearly 60 yards in the air for a touchdown to the emerging Antonio Freeman. Final score, 37-6. But the real test would come in Week 7, in a game that would decide the true power in the NFC. Green Bay versus the 49ers. The Clash of Titans. The whole world stopped for this Monday night clash. It was the 5-1 Packers against the 4-1 49ers. But the X factor of the game wasn't Brett Favre, it was Antonio Freeman. If Favre had 2 elite options to throw to, Brooks and Freeman, it would spell disaster for any defense. But on the Packers' very first offensive play, this strategy crumbled in an instant. Star receiver Robert Brooks suffered a season-ending knee blowout. The heart of the Packers' receiving core was gone before the game had even begun. By the third quarter, San Francisco held a 17-6 lead, and the Packers looked beaten. But then came one of the craziest plays in Monday night history. Brett Favre was ready to throw it deep to Don Beebe. Beebe was a 32-year-old backup who was signed this season, not exactly the kind of guy to rely on. But in this game, Beebe was the spark that dragged the Packers back from the brink. Then, in overtime, the Packers got the ball at their own 44. And Holmgren, he let Chris Yockey attempt the longest overtime field goal in NFL history. Chris Jackie hammered it through the uprights for an OT victory. Green Bay had won the battle, but it came at a major cost. They had lost Robert Brooks for the entire season. But coming off this emotional high, the Packers were iced as they headed into their bye week. And even though their Week 9 matchup was against the 1-7 Bucs, Coach Holmgren was still concerned. Because even after dispatching the Bucs and Lions, the Packers still couldn't rest. In Week 11, they would have to face the 6-3 Chiefs on the road. Arrowhead Stadium, it was a literal house of pain. To make matters worse, Green Bay was missing defensive stars like Dotson to injury. This Packers run defense was ranked number 1, but all of a sudden it looked vulnerable. For the first time all season, the Packers were physically dominated at the line of scrimmage. Final score, Chiefs 27, Packers 20. This loss was a wake-up call. It showed the defense wasn't invincible. And just when it couldn't get any worse, their next game, it was the showdown of the decade. Green Bay Packers against Dallas Cowboys. Monday Night Football. All eyes were on Favre to slay the dragon. But without Brooks and Freeman, how well could he really play? Not only that, but Dallas had a secret weapon. Quarterback Deion Sanders. Sanders played so well that Green Bay completed just 7 catches for 51 yards all night. The Packers left the field with a bitter 21-6 loss. And just like that, the media began to whisper, can they actually win the big one if they can't beat Dallas? From 8-1 to now 8-3, it felt like the season was slipping away. Coach Holmgren, though, he had a plan. If the Packers could secure home field advantage, the road to the Super Bowl wouldn't have to go through Texas. So, for the remaining 5 games, he knew that his team had to play perfect football, and they would soon have a saving grace by the name of Bad Moon. Andre Rison was a controversial wideout who was known as a mercenary. 4 different franchises in just 8 seasons. Many believed he would disrupt the chemistry of a team already on edge, but the Packers, they were desperate.
The Packers claim Pro Bowl wide receiver Andre Rison off the waiver wire from Jacksonville. The only question now is whether or not there is enough time for Rison to learn this very complicated Green Bay offense.
And with the pressure on him to deliver, Rison showed up big time. See, he provided that vertical threat that the Rams had no answer for. But once again, it was the defense that stole the show, as cornerback Doug Evans got a pick 6. Favre was also back at his best as his team won 24-9. But the news got even better in the locker room. The Cowboys, Eagles, and Redskins had all lost that day. So, all the Packers had to do was win out. Then in Week 14, the team finally had good news for a change. Antonio Freeman was finally back, and with Rison now on the team, Freeman was now free. 156 receiving yards on his first game back. But Freeman wasn't the star of the show. Punt returner Desmond Howard sliced through the Bears for a 75-yard touchdown. Packers win 28-17. But looming next, it was a date with the 11-1 Broncos. This was a team many favored to win the Super Bowl. But the clash of the Titans never actually materialized. The Broncos already clinched home field advantage in the AFC. So, while Denver had nothing to gain, Green Bay needed the win for home field advantage. So Green Bay answered the call. Antonio Freeman played the game of his life with 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. Final score, 41-6, the biggest win all season. With 2 more wins against the Lions and Vikings, Green Bay ended the season in historic fashion. They became the first team in a 16-game season to rank first in points scored and also the least points conceded. And we have to remember how many injuries this team had all season. The 96 Packers had the chance to cement themselves as arguably the best team in history, but their road to the Super Bowl was tougher than any team had ever experienced. First up was the 49ers, winners 2 years prior, a team that knew what it takes to go all the way. But on the very first punt, Desmond Howard broke the game once again, a 71-yard touchdown. Howard had put the 49ers in a hole they would never climb out of. Final score, 35-14. Then came the 12-4 Panthers. They were the upstarts. The only problem? They would arrive at Lambeau Field facing the frozen tundra. The temperature was plummeting toward the single digits, and Brett Favre, he held a terrifying 18-0 record in games below 35 degrees. And you bet he showed up when it mattered. But while Favre was the MVP, another player was the unsung hero, Dorsey Levens. He finished with 135 yards from scrimmage. This team was stacked, and the frozen tundra, it claimed another victim. For the first time in 29 years, the Green Bay Packers were going back to the Super Bowl. Standing in their way was the flavor of the day, the New England Patriots. For Green Bay, this wasn't just any game. They were playing to bring their trophy back to the smallest city in the league. And for Favre, winning the Super Bowl would be the ultimate redemption story for his career. So with these high stakes, the MVP came to play. On the second play of the game, he threw a 54-yard touchdown pass to Andre Rison. Rison was criticized his entire career. Now, he was scoring touchdowns in Super Bowls. Then Favre threw a record-setting 81-yard bomb to Freeman. He was simply unplayable. But as we already know, this team isn't just a one-man show. Once again, Desmond Howard returned the ball like a legend, a 99-yard touchdown, the longest in Super Bowl history at the time. Howard became the first special teams player in history to be named Super Bowl MVP. Final score 35-21. But the real emotion wasn't in the numbers, it was in the trophy presentation. After 3 decades of haunting ghosts, the Packers claimed their 12th title. The '96 Packers had fulfilled their destiny, turning a small-town legacy into a modern-day dynasty.